The alarms were still ringing when I realized the joke had gone too far. The Galactic Council had assembled for its annual assessment, a pompous affair of crystal podiums, shimmering robes, and an endless list of decrees that no one outside this dome-shaped chamber would ever care about. But this year was different, because humanity, my people, had been given a seat at the farthest edge of the chamber, a spot reserved for the least consequential species. That's what the Council called us, least consequential. A polite phrase for weak. And then someone, me, laughed. It wasn't planned. It wasn't diplomatic. It wasn't even smart. But when the Counselor of the Threxian Dominion stood tall on his 6 legs and declared that humans ranked below luminescent mollusks on the Galactic Threat Index, I just couldn't help myself. The sound ripped out of me like a cough, echoing across the crystalline walls, and suddenly the entire chamber of dignitaries froze. Every eye, compound, multifaceted, glowing, lidless, swiveled toward me. "Is there something humorous?" the Threxian hissed, his mandibles clacking like a guillotine. I should have apologized. I should have shrunk back into my chair and prayed the translator glitched. But no. Instead, my mouth betrayed me. "Sorry," I said, straightening my jacket. "It's just ranking humans below glowing snails? That's comedy gold where I'm from." Gasps. Ripples of outrage. The ambassador beside me, an aging professor named Harlan Dray, buried his face in his hands. I heard whispers spreading across the chamber like a virus. Insolence, disrespect, weakness disguised as arrogance. The counselor slammed one leg against the marble dais. "Humans," he spat, "are fragile. Their bones snap under minor pressure. Their vision is primitive. Their lifespan is pitifully short. They are incapable of regenerative healing, of adaptive camouflage, of even withstanding a proper vacuum environment. They are." "We're still here," I interrupted, my pulse hammering in my throat, "so we must be doing something right." That was the moment I became infamous. Not for my intelligence. Not for strategy. For mouthing off at the most powerful gathering in the galaxy. Within hours, I was trending across the Council's holonetworks. Primitive ape mocks galactic order. Humans laugh at their own weakness. Some species found it entertaining. Others considered it blasphemy. A few saw it as dangerous. And one empire, in particular, took it as a challenge. The Vorik Dominion. They were the Council's enforcers, a warlike species bred in the crucible of volcanic planets, towering beasts of muscle and plated hides. To them, the Council was a game of dominance, and any hint of defiance was an excuse for bloodshed. They issued a decree before the chamber even adjourned: if humans wanted to mock their betters, they would have the chance to prove their worth on the battlefield. And that's how war found us. The first reports came 3 days later. A Vorik fleet had descended on the mining colony of Ceres Theta, a rocky outpost in the asteroid belt. 200 civilians. A handful of defense drones. No military presence. The Vorik slaughtered everyone in under 6 minutes. The message was clear: surrender or be erased. Panic swept across Earth and the colonies. News feeds screamed headlines: humanity targeted. Weakness exposed. Future uncertain. Some wanted to submit immediately, to crawl back to the Council and beg forgiveness. Others demanded retaliation, though we had no ships, no armies, nothing close to the firepower the Vorik could unleash. Me? I just wanted to hide. I wasn't a soldier. I wasn't a leader. Hell, I wasn't even supposed to be at that council meeting. I was a junior translator, tagging along to assist Dray with language protocols. My only crime was having a bad sense of humor at the wrong time. And yet, somehow, my words had lit the fuse of humanity's first interstellar war. The guilt gnawed at me. Every explosion on the news, every face of the dead, I saw my reflection there. But guilt had no time to root deep, because within a week, Earth called me home. Not to punish me. Not to exile me. To put me in front of cameras. "You're a symbol now," Dray told me, his voice grim as we rode the shuttle down through Earth's thick clouds. "The people need someone who looks unafraid. Someone who reminds them we still have dignity." "I don't feel dignified," I muttered. "You don't have to feel it," he said. "You just have to show it." Earth was chaos. Military conscription centers overflowed with volunteers who had never held a weapon in their lives. Factories retooled overnight, shifting from civilian goods to makeshift starship plating and experimental railguns. The governments of Earth, usually fractured, bickering, hopelessly divided, suddenly united under one banner: survival. And me. They dragged me onto a stage in Geneva, under blazing lights, in front of billions watching across every colony. I could barely breathe. My palms sweated. But when the cameras rolled, when the red recording light blinked, something inside me hardened. "We were deemed the weakest," I said into the microphone. "But weakness doesn't mean defeat. Fragile does not mean helpless. And anyone who thinks humanity will roll over and die without a fight, well," I smirked, the same dangerous smirk that had started this whole mess, "they haven't met us yet." The crowd erupted. Across Earth and Mars and Titan, people cheered. For the first time since the Vorik attack, hope sparked. Not because we had power, but because we refused to bow. Of course, words alone couldn't stop plasma cannons. The Vorik returned 2 weeks later, this time striking Luna Base. They expected fear, surrender. Instead, they found humans improvising. The engineers had rigged the mining lasers into a defense grid, cutting down 2 Vorik dropships before they landed. Children had been evacuated through maintenance tunnels, entire families smuggling themselves away through systems never designed for evacuation. And the soldiers, if you could call them that, fought tooth and nail with scavenged rifles, welding torches, even bare fists. They lost, yes. Luna Base fell. But the Vorik paid dearly for it, losing a battleship and hundreds of troops to what should have been a trivial conquest. The galaxy noticed. Broadcasts rippled across council space. Humans resist. Humans adapt. Humans bite back. Other species who had written us off began to whisper. Not admiration, not yet. But curiosity. Because survival was supposed to be impossible. And yet, we endured. That was when I met Commander Ilara Vance. She strode into the War Council chamber in New Geneva like she owned the place. Tall, sharp-eyed, her uniform immaculate even in the midst of crisis. She was one of the youngest commanders in the fleet, what little fleet we had, and already a legend for turning a failed colonization mission on Europa into a self-sustaining outpost against all odds. "You're the loudmouth," she said, pointing at me. "Depends who you ask," I replied. "You started this." "Yeah," I said softly. "I know." "Then you're going to help finish it." That was Ilara. No patience for pity. No time for apologies. She believed in results, in action, and, God help me, she believed in me. Not because I was a soldier. Not because I was smart. But because I had something she could use. Unpredictability. "Vorik think in straight lines," she told me later, hunched over a holographic map of our solar system. Honor, dominance, overwhelming force. They don't understand misdirection. They don't understand stubbornness. They don't understand crazy. "Crazy," I echoed. She grinned. "You're good at that." And so, somehow, I found myself drafted not into the front lines, but into the strategy rooms. A translator turned accidental provocateur turned symbol of chaos. Ilara called me her wild card. The first mission I sat in on was Operation Glass Veil. The Vorik fleet was massing near the asteroid belt again, preparing another strike. We had no chance of meeting them head-on. But Ilara proposed something different. Instead of defending the colonies, we'd abandon them, temporarily, and rig the asteroids with explosives. "Suicide," one general scoffed. "Not if it works," Ilara countered. And when everyone hesitated, she turned to me. "What do you think, wild card?" All eyes on me. The room tense. And once again, my mouth betrayed me. "I think," I said slowly, "if glowing snails outrank us, the least we can do is make sure the Vorik trip over a few rocks." Laughter rippled through the chamber. Tension eased. And somehow, against all logic, the operation was approved. It worked. The Vorik advanced, confident, unstoppable. They carved through the belt, only to trigger the mines hidden in the debris. A chain reaction of detonations ripped through their formation, scattering ships, tearing apart frigates, sending the rest limping back to regroup. For the first time, humans had forced them to retreat. We lost colonies, yes. We sacrificed ground. But we proved something to the galaxy. We could hurt them. And me. I felt the shift, deep in my bones. The guilt was still there, but it twisted into something else, resolve. Maybe my laughter had started this war. But maybe, just maybe, it could also help us win it. But that victory painted a target on my back. The Vorik didn't just want Earth anymore. They wanted me. The insolent human who mocked them, the voice that rallied defiance, the symbol that turned weakness into stubborn fire. Rumors spread that their warlords had sworn personal vengeance. Bounties circulated on shadow networks. Capture the human alive. Elara doubled my security. I hated it. I wasn't a hero. I wasn't even brave. Every night I lay awake, wondering if the next dawn would be humanity's last. But every morning, I stood up, put on the mask of confidence, and spoke the words people needed to hear. Because the alternative was despair. And despair was death. The turning point came at Titan Station. It wasn't supposed to be a battlefield. It was a science hub, filled with labs and observatories, fragile domes clinging to Saturn's moon. But the Vorik struck anyway, sweeping down with a fleet meant to erase it. By the time we scrambled a response, they were already burning the surface. Elara threw together a desperate counterattack. Half-armed freighters. Civilian shuttles strapped with railguns. I was ordered to stay back, safe on Earth. But when I tried to argue, she cut me off. "You wanted to prove humans aren't weak," she said. "Then stop hiding. Come see what it costs." And so, for the first time, I boarded a ship into battle. The view from orbit was hell. Titan's dome shattered, flames flickering against methane skies, debris glittering like a funeral pyre. The Vorik flagship loomed massive ahead, its hull glowing with the heat of entry. Our cobbled-together fleet looked like toys in comparison. "This is suicide," I whispered. Elara glanced at me, calm even as alarms blared. "Maybe. But if we're going to die, we'll make damn sure the galaxy remembers how." And in that moment, watching her steel herself against impossible odds, I felt it, the heartbeat of humanity. Fragile, yes. Small, yes. But unbreakable when cornered. I didn't know then how the battle would unfold, or how much blood we would spill. All I knew was this: the galaxy had called us the weakest. And from this battlefield, that lie would burn. The Battle of Titan Station was supposed to be the end of us. Every projection, every simulation, every expert said so. But humans don't follow simulations. We break them. I remember gripping the edge of my console as our improvised fleet engaged the Vorik. The void lit up with streaks of plasma and flashes of detonations. Our ships weren't sleek cruisers or engineered war machines. They were mining freighters with armor welded on in layers, orbital shuttles jury-rigged with scavenged weapons, even a few luxury liners stripped of comfort and turned into makeshift carriers. Against the Dominion, they looked like scavengers attacking a leviathan. But scavengers survive. Elara barked orders with the precision of a surgeon, every word calm, deliberate, but carrying the edge of desperation. Keep the freighters close, use their mass to soak the first volley. Civilians stay behind the debris field. Railgun crews focus fire on their escorts, cripple their mobility. The Vorik laughed at us, literally. Their comms broadcast taunts across the open channels. "Pathetic," one growled, his voice like grinding stone. "Your hulls are tin. Your weapons, toys. We will crush you in minutes." "Funny thing about toys," I muttered, surprising myself as the words left my mouth. "Sometimes they're sharper than they look." The fleet's comms picked it up, and laughter rippled among our crews. Even in the middle of slaughter, humor slipped in like oxygen into a vacuum. It didn't make sense, but maybe that's why it worked. The Vorik expected terror. Instead, they got defiance wrapped in sarcasm. And then we showed them what desperation invents. The first Vorik cruiser advanced into the asteroid belt, confident in its shields. That's when the engineers aboard the freighter Martha Kane executed their insane plan. They overloaded the freighter's engines, vented its fuel tanks, and ignited them with a railgun slug. The explosion wasn't elegant. It wasn't precise. But it tore through the Vorik cruiser's flank like paper. One kill. Against all odds. The battlefield went silent for a heartbeat, as if no one believed what had happened. Then the comms erupted with cheers. Humanity had blooded the Vorik. Elara seized the momentum. "Don't let up. hit them again before they regroup. The Vorik, furious now, pushed harder. They poured fire into our lines, shredding smaller ships by the dozens. Civilians screamed over the comms. Hulls cracked open, spilling atmosphere into the void. Every death twisted inside me like a knife. But through it all, the humans kept improvising. A mining shuttle detached its drill and hurled it, spinning, into a Vorik frigate's engine. A research vessel overloaded its experimental particle array, slicing through enemy fighters before burning itself out. A transport ship, out of ammo, rammed directly into a Vorik troop carrier, sacrificing itself to scatter enemy boarding parties into the vacuum. It was chaos. Bloody, desperate chaos. And somehow, it worked. By the time the Vorik flagship realized what was happening, their formation was broken. They'd lost nearly a third of their force to ships that shouldn't have been capable of fighting at all. And then Ilara revealed the final part of her plan. "Now," she whispered, her eyes like steel. From the shadow of Saturn's rings emerged 3 ships, our only true warships, hidden until now. They unleashed a concentrated volley on the flagship's shield array, hammering it with everything we had left. It wasn't enough to destroy it, but it was enough to make the Vorik retreat. And retreat they did. For the first time in recorded history, the Vorik Dominion fled from battle. The galaxy didn't believe it at first. News feeds scrambled to confirm the footage. Primitive humans drive back Vorik. They replayed the explosions, the desperate tactics, the madness of ramming freighters into warships. Some called it luck. Others called it barbarism. A few whispered the unthinkable. Maybe humans weren't weak after all. On Earth, people celebrated like it was the end of war. Cities erupted in fireworks. Families danced in the streets. Soldiers returned to their barracks as heroes. And me? They dragged me onto another stage, shoving a microphone into my hand. "How did you do it?" a reporter shouted. "We didn't," I said honestly. "We survived. Barely." "But you won," another pressed. I hesitated, then said, "If that's what you want to call it, fine. But let's be clear, we won by being stubborn, reckless, and just crazy enough to make the impossible happen. That's not strength the way the Vorik measure it. That's human strength." The word stuck. Human strength. A phrase that spread like wildfire. Politicians parroted it. Civilians painted it on walls. Soldiers carved it into their armor. The Vorik heard it too. And they hated it. The retaliation was brutal. Weeks later, they hit Mars. Not with warships this time, but with biological weapons. Viruses engineered to adapt faster than we could treat them. Within hours, entire domes collapsed into quarantine zones, red warning lights flashing across the cities. People coughed blood into the thin air as medics scrambled to keep up. "Cowards," Ilara spat when we received the reports. "They couldn't beat us head-on, so they poison us instead." We worked around the clock, every lab on Earth and its colonies racing to develop countermeasures. But the Vorik virus wasn't just lethal, it was cunning. It mutated faster than we could analyze it. Vaccines that worked one day failed the next. Panic spread. That's when something unexpected happened. Other species began to help. Quietly, cautiously, but helped nonetheless. The Veari, a race of insectoid scholars, leaked ancient medical records to our scientists. The Cellari, amphibious healers, smuggled protein chains across council borders. Even the Akar, who had once mocked us openly, sent encrypted messages offering unofficial assistance. Not because they liked us. Not because they cared about humanity. But because we had done the impossible, we had made the Vorik bleed. And now others wondered if maybe, just maybe, we could succeed where they had failed. With their help, we developed countermeasures. They weren't perfect, but they slowed the virus, gave our bodies time to adapt. And here's the thing about humans. Adaptation is what we do best. We don't grow claws or scales. We don't regenerate limbs. We adapt with stubborn will, with medicine, with sheer refusal to quit. Within weeks, survival rates climbed. The Vorik plague lost its bite. Another failure for the Dominion. Another crack in their myth of invincibility. But survival came at a cost. The war was no longer a distant news feed, it was everywhere. Every family had someone fighting. Every colony had scars. Supplies ran thin. Food rationing became the norm. Factories churned out weapons instead of luxuries. I walked through New Geneva one night after another broadcast, and I saw what the war had done. Children playing with toy ships in the rubble of bombed buildings. Mothers patching uniforms by candlelight. Soldiers laughing too loud in bars, trying to drown their fear. We were changing. Humanity was hardening. And I couldn't decide if that was victory or tragedy. Elara found me staring at the skyline, lost in thought. "You're quiet," she said. "Just wondering what we'll look like when this is over," I admitted. She didn't hesitate. "Stronger. Or broken," I muttered. She turned to me then, her gaze fierce. "Both. But still standing. And that's all that matters." The council didn't stay silent forever. Eventually, the galaxy's leaders summoned us again. Not to congratulate us. Not to offer aid. But to scold us. "The war is destabilizing," one counselor hissed. "The Vorik are enraged, and you encourage them." "You brought this on yourselves," another chimed in. "We should sanction Earth," a third proposed. I stood in the chamber, trying not to laugh again. But Elara didn't hold back. "Sanction us," she said coldly, "while the Vorik slaughter colonies. While they unleash plagues. You sit in your crystal towers, safe, while we bleed. And you dare lecture us." The chamber erupted in noise. Some outraged, some silent, a few thoughtful. The council tried to posture, but the truth was undeniable. Humanity was fighting a war the rest of them were too afraid to fight. And even if they despised us, they couldn't ignore us anymore. That night, Dre whispered to me, "They won't admit it, but they're watching. Every move we make, every tactic we try. If we fall, they'll cheer. But if we win..." "If we win," I finished, "we change everything." The Vorik understood that too. Which is why they escalated again. This time, they didn't attack colonies. They came for Earth. It began with sensor alerts, a fleet unlike anything we'd seen before, descending from deep space. Dozens of warships, carriers, dreadnoughts, each one bristling with weapons. They weren't here to raid. They were here to end us. Panic surged across the planet. Evacuation plans scrambled into motion. Defense systems, still incomplete, came online with desperate haste. Our fleet, patched, battered, but alive, rallied for what looked like the final stand. I should have been terrified. And I was. But beneath the fear, a strange clarity settled in. This was it. The moment we'd been dragged toward since the day I laughed in that council chamber. Humanity, the weakest race, was about to face annihilation. And we weren't going to go quietly. On the eve of battle, Elara called the War Council together. The room was tense, every face grim. We all knew the odds. But Elara didn't give a speech of doom. Instead, she turned to me. "Wild card," she said. "Got any ideas?" The room chuckled, tired but genuine. They looked at me, not as a diplomat, not as a mistake, but as part of this fight. And for once, I didn't hesitate. "Yeah," I said slowly. "We stopped thinking like soldiers. The Vorik expect straight lines, fleets against fleets, strength against strength. But that's not who we are. We're scavengers, survivors, lunatics who duct tape miracles together. So let's do that. Let's give them a war they can't predict." Elara's smile was sharp as a blade. "Now you're thinking human." And as the Vorik fleet loomed ever closer, humanity prepared to fight not with power, not with tradition, but with madness. Because weakness isn't the opposite of strength. It's the seed of something stronger. Something the Vorik could never understand. Something human. The sky over Earth was alive with fire. From the ground, you could see them, Vorik warships blotting out the stars, their hulls glowing crimson as they entered orbit. Cities trembled as defense sirens howled, skyscrapers flickering with evacuation lights. For billions of humans across the planet, this wasn't news anymore. It was reality. The Dominion wasn't here to raid, to threaten, to posture. They were here to finish us. Inside the command bunker beneath New Geneva, I felt the air vibrating with tension. Engineers screamed updates. Generals barked into comms. Screens flickered with red warnings faster than anyone could read them. And in the center of it all stood Ilara, her arms folded, eyes locked on the holomap as though she could will it into submission. "We can't match them ship for ship," General Reyes said grimly, his uniform stained with sweat. "Not even close. If we engage them in open orbit, we're dust." "They'll bombard us from orbit if we stay grounded," Ilara shot back. "We don't get the luxury of playing defense anymore. We hit them first." The room erupted in arguments. Attack was suicide. Defense was surrender. No option looked like survival. And then, as always, eyes turned to me. "Wild card," Ilara said. "What do you see?" I stared at the holomap, at the impossible odds, at the swarm of red Vorik markers converging on our blue scraps of ships. My throat was dry, my hands trembling. But beneath it all, that strange clarity remained, the kind born when you have nothing left to lose. "They expect strength," I said slowly. "They expect fleets meeting in straight lines, battles fought by the rules. We can't give them that. So we give them something else." Ilara tilted her head. "Go on. They think we're weak. So let's weaponize it." Confusion flickered across the generals' faces. But Ilara's eyes lit up. She understood immediately. "You mean chaos," she said. "Exactly," I replied. "We turn every weakness into bait. We let them think they're breaking us apart, when really, we're pulling them deeper into a trap." Silence hung in the bunker for a heartbeat, then Reyes cursed under his breath. "It's insane." "Insane," Ilara said, her voice like steel. "And human. I like it." The plan that followed was madness incarnate. We didn't meet the Vorik with fleets arrayed in neat lines. Instead, we scattered our ships into swarms, smaller groups weaving through debris fields, hiding among orbital junk, even camouflaging themselves against the glint of solar panels. Civilian freighters pretended to flee, luring enemy fighters into minefields hidden in Earth's old satellite graveyard. On the ground, entire cities went dark, plunging into blackout, as if abandoned. When Vorik drop pods descended, expecting easy slaughter, they were met by ambushes. Humans with rail rifles hidden in subway tunnels, drones disguised as wreckage, militias luring them into collapsed skyscrapers wired with explosives. We gave them no front to attack, no line to crush. Only 1,000 tiny cuts, each one more infuriating than the last. The Vorik responded with fury. Their flagship unleashed orbital bombardments, scorching swaths of the Pacific. Their carriers disgorged wave after wave of troops, tearing through defenses. But for every blow they landed, they bled for it. And for the first time, their overwhelming dominance looked clumsy. I rowed aboard the Iron Resolve, one of our few true warships, as we danced through the chaos. Ilara stood at the helm, her presence like an anchor amid the storm. Every time a Vorik ship moved, she saw angles no one else did. Every time panic threatened to overwhelm us, she snapped us back with a barked order. "Target their comm relays," she commanded. "Cut them off from coordination." Railgun slugs tore through a Vorik frigate's antenna array, leaving it drifting aimless. "Feint left, then dive into the debris," she ordered. "Make them chase us." We ducked into the shadow of a broken lunar cruiser, drawing 2 Vorik destroyers after us, straight into the path of hidden mines. The blast ripped them apart. But the Vorik weren't fools. They adapted quickly. Their flagship rallied, pulling forces tighter, forming a wall of plasma fire that threatened to sweep us aside. One by one, our smaller ships were caught in the inferno, burning bright against the void. Each explosion echoed through my chest like a hammer strike. "How long can we keep this up?" I asked hoarsely. Ilara didn't flinch. "As long as we have to." The breaking point came over South America. The Vorik had focused their bombardment there, hammering the jungles and cities with ruthless precision. Billions huddled underground as the surface turned to glass. We couldn't let it continue. Ilara called an emergency council aboard the Resolve. Generals, captains, engineers, all exhausted, all bloodied. "We're bleeding them," Reyes admitted, "but not fast enough. They'll grind us down eventually." "Unless we cut off the head," Ilara said. She pointed at the holomap, at the Vorik flagship looming above Earth like a nightmare. "We take that out, the rest scatter." The room went dead silent. Attacking a Vorik flagship directly was madness. It was bigger than anything we had. Its shields could shrug off a dozen of our warships. Its weapons could carve continents. But something in me stirred. Maybe shields can shrug off weapons, I said softly. But can they shrug off Earth? All eyes turned to me. Explain, Ilara said. I swallowed hard. The orbital elevator. It's still standing over Quito, right? It's tethered straight into orbit. If we overload its stabilizers, collapse it upward instead of down. Her eyes widened. The tether slings into orbit. Straight into the flagship. Reyes gaped. That would level half the continent. It'll level the planet if we don't stop them, Ilara shot back. The room held its breath. Then, slowly, one by one, heads nodded. It was insane. Reckless. Desperate. In other words, it was perfect. The operation began within the hour. Ground teams fought like demons to clear Vorik forces from the elevator base, while engineers overloaded the stabilizers. I stayed aboard the Resolve, watching the madness unfold. The elevator stretched into the sky like a silver spear, its tether gleaming against the burning clouds. From orbit, the Vorik flagship adjusted course, as if sensing the danger. They know, Ilara muttered. We don't have much time. Our fleet threw itself into the path of the flagship, buying every precious second. Ships burned by the dozens, human voices screaming over the comms, but none turned back. They knew what was at stake. Stabilizers overloaded, the engineer reported. Ready to release on your command. Ilara looked at me. Not Reyes, not the other captains. You started this, she said quietly. You finish it. My chest tightened. I thought of every mistake, every death that had followed my laughter in the council chamber. And I thought of Earth, burning, battered, but still alive. Do it, I whispered. The sky split. The orbital tether groaned like the bones of the planet itself, then snapped upward with catastrophic force. 100 kilometers of reinforced cable whipped into orbit, accelerating faster than any missile. It struck the Vorik flagship dead center. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the unthinkable. The flagship buckled. Its shields flared, screamed, and collapsed. The tether punched through its hull like a spear, tearing decks apart, splitting the ship in two. Explosions rippled along its spine, plasma cores rupturing in a chain reaction. The Vorik flagship died in fire. The shockwave ripped across the battlefield, scattering the Dominion fleet into chaos. Without their command, their formation crumbled. Some ships fled. Others fired blindly. A few tried to fight on, but humanity swarmed them, rabid and unrelenting. For the first time, Earth was safe. The aftermath was surreal. Cities still burned. Millions still mourned. But the unthinkable had happened. Humanity had destroyed a Vorik flagship. Across the galaxy, the reaction was electric. Species that had dismissed us as fragile apes now watched in awe. Networks replayed the footage endlessly, the tether whipping into orbit, the explosion, the impossible victory. Some called it luck. Some called it madness. But a new phrase began to echo across the stars. The weakest fought the strongest, and won. That night, I sat with Ilara in the ruins of New Geneva, staring up at the scarred sky. You realize, I said, we just made the Vorik angrier than ever. She smirked, though her eyes were tired. Let them be angry. Anger makes them sloppy. Fear makes them dangerous. And us? I asked. Her gaze softened. We're something they've never faced before. A species too stubborn to die. Too crazy to quit. Too human to bow. I thought about that long into the night. Weakness hadn't doomed us. It had defined us. And in that definition, we found strength no one else could understand. The war wasn't over. The Vorik weren't defeated. But for the first time, the galaxy believed humanity had a chance. And so did we. The wreckage of the Vorik flagship still drifted above Earth when the first sunrise broke over the horizon. For weeks afterward, you could see it from the surface. Massive chunks of alien metal glowing in orbit, a scar against the stars, a reminder that the impossible had happened. Children pointed at it from city streets. Survivors whispered prayers beneath it. Engineers scrambled to study every fragment that fell to the surface. But no one, not a single human alive, looked at it without feeling something shift inside. We had slain a monster. The galaxy reacted with shockwaves. Holoscreens across Council space replayed the footage again and again, the tether whipping skyward, the flagship splitting apart, the Dominion scattering. Commentators argued endlessly. Some called it reckless. Some called it brilliant. Others insisted it was suicide disguised as strategy. But none could deny the truth. Humanity, once mocked as the weakest race, had done what no other species had ever managed. We had not only resisted the Vorik, we had wounded them. The days that followed were chaos. The Dominion was reeling but not broken. Their fleets retreated into deep space, regrouping, howling for vengeance. But for the first time in centuries, they weren't the only predators in the galaxy. Other species began to rise. Quietly at first, then openly. The Cellari deployed fleets to guard their colonies. The Akar, proud and reptilian, announced they would no longer pay tribute to the Vorik. Even the Threxians, who once mocked us openly, began training exercises near their borders, exercises that looked suspiciously like preparing for war. We had lit the match. And the galaxy, long cowed into submission, suddenly remembered what it meant to fight back. On Earth, the celebrations were tempered by grief. Entire continents bore scars. Millions were dead. Cities lay in rubble. Food shortages gripped the colonies. No one pretended the war was won. But survival itself was victory enough. Everywhere I went, people treated me like a hero. I hated it. You don't understand, I told them again and again. I'm not a soldier. I'm not a strategist. I just laughed, one old man interrupted, smiling as he clasped my hand. You laughed when they said we were weak. You reminded us not to bow. I wanted to argue, to explain that my laughter had been nervous, stupid, a mistake. But every time I looked into the eyes of survivors, I saw what it had become. Not a mistake. A spark. Ilara didn't let me wallow in guilt for long. She hauled me back into strategy rooms, into rebuilding councils, into war planning sessions. The Vorik aren't done, she reminded me. They'll come again. Stronger. Angrier. We have to be ready. Ready with what? I asked. We threw everything we had at them. Half our fleet's gone. Our people are exhausted. Exactly, she said, her eyes fierce. And they still couldn't beat us. Imagine what happens when we rebuild. And so humanity began the hardest task of all, preparing for the next war even as we buried our dead. Factories roared back to life, no longer cobbling together scrap fleets but designing new ships from lessons learned. Engineers used Vorik wreckage to reverse engineer weapons and armor. Scientists dissected fragments of their biotech, hunting for weaknesses. Colonies banded together, pooling resources as never before. But it wasn't just technology that changed. Humanity itself changed. On Mars, children who had grown up under quarantine now trained as medics and virologists, determined never to be caught unprepared again. On Titan, survivors of the station massacre rebuilt with their own hands, crafting domes stronger than before. On Earth, soldiers who had fought with improvised weapons formed the backbone of a new fleet, veterans who knew that victory didn't come from perfection, but from refusing to quit. We were no longer the weakest. We were something new. The Council couldn't ignore us anymore. When we returned to the crystalline chamber, the atmosphere was different. No longer were we shoved into the farthest corner. No longer did ambassadors sneer openly. Some counselors still tried. Humans are reckless, one intoned. They destabilize everything they touch. Reckless, Ilara said smoothly, and still alive. Can you say the same for those who bowed to the Vorik? The chamber buzzed. For once, no one interrupted her. Others were more cautious. You have awakened something dangerous. If the Dominion retaliates, they may not stop with Earth. Good, I said before I could stop myself. Then maybe the rest of you will finally stop hiding behind us and fight for yourselves. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Old habits die hard. But this time, no one laughed at the insolent human. Some even nodded quietly. We hadn't just fought for ourselves. We'd proved to the galaxy that the Vorik could bleed. And in that proof, we'd changed the balance of power forever. Of course, change doesn't come without cost. The Vorik weren't gone. Scouts reported their fleets regrouping, forging alliances with mercenary species, testing new weapons. The Dominion was wounded, yes, but a wounded beast is the most dangerous of all. Ilara gathered us in New Geneva for a closed session. The holomap showed Vorik movements, red blips multiplying across the edges of known space. "They'll come again," she said simply. "And when they do, they won't underestimate us." The room was silent. Everyone knew what she meant. Our victory had been incredible, but it was also a challenge, a gauntlet thrown at the feet of the most ruthless empire in the galaxy. "Then we don't wait," I said before anyone else could speak. My voice surprised even me. "We don't sit here hoping they attack on our terms. We hit them first. Show them we're not prey anymore." The room turned to me in shock. Once upon a time, I was just the translator who couldn't keep his mouth shut. Now, my words carried weight. Ilara smiled faintly. "You're learning." The first offensive wasn't grand. It wasn't a fleet sweeping across enemy territory. It was sabotage, raids, strikes against supply lines. Humanity became the ghost in the dark, the shadow the Vorik couldn't predict. We used everything we'd learned from desperation: feints, ambushes, distractions. A single scout ship would lure entire squadrons into asteroid traps. A civilian freighter, seemingly helpless, would suddenly reveal hidden railguns and tear through enemy escorts. Colonists on frontier worlds turned caves into fortresses, refusing to surrender even when surrounded. Every move whispered the same message across the stars: humanity will not bow. And the Vorik hated us for it. One night, months into the new campaign, I stood with Ilara on the balcony of the rebuilt Geneva Tower. The city still bore scars, rubble piled where skyscrapers once stood, but lights glowed again. Children's laughter echoed faintly through the streets. "You ever think," I asked quietly, "that we're becoming just like them? Hard, ruthless, always fighting?" Ilara didn't answer right away. She stared at the stars, at the debris of war still glinting in orbit. "No," she said finally. "We'll never be like them. They fight because they must dominate. We fight because we refuse to die. That's not the same thing." I nodded slowly. She was right. The Vorik couldn't understand us because they had never needed to. They were born into strength, into dominance. They had never been fragile, never been underestimated, never been forced to laugh at their own weakness just to survive another day. But we had. And that was our strength. The galaxy began to whisper a new name for us. Not the weakest. Not the fragile. Something else. The stubborn ones. At first it was meant as insult, coined by a Vorik warlord in a furious speech. But the name spread, and humans embraced it. We wore it like armor. Stubborn enough to resist extinction. Stubborn enough to fight when surrender would have been easier. Stubborn enough to laugh in the face of annihilation. It wasn't strength in the way the galaxy understood it. It was something fiercer. Something stranger. Something uniquely human. I wish I could say the war ended neatly after that. It didn't. Wars never do. The Vorik still lurk out there, sharpening their claws, hungering for revenge. Humanity still rebuilds, still mourns, still prepares for battles yet to come. But the balance has shifted forever. No one dares call us weak now. No one dares ignore us. And me. I've stopped apologizing for the laughter that started it all. Because maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe it was the truest reflection of what humanity is, the ability to stare down the impossible, feel the fear, and laugh anyway. One evening, months after the battle for Earth, I walked through the ruins of Quito, where the orbital elevator once stood. Families had returned, setting up homes among the rubble. Children played in the shadow of the shattered base, their laughter rising into the night sky. A young girl tugged at my sleeve. "Mister," she asked shyly, "is it true you laughed at the Vorik?" I knelt, smiling. "Yeah, I guess I did." "Weren't you scared?" "Terrified," I admitted. She frowned, puzzled. "Then why'd you laugh?" I thought about it, about everything that had happened since. Then I said, because sometimes, when you're weak, laughter is the only weapon you have. And sometimes... I looked at the stars, at the drifting wreckage still gleaming there. Sometimes, it's the sharpest one. The girl giggled, as if she understood, and ran back to her friends. I stood alone then, staring up at the sky, and for the first time since the war began, I felt peace. Not because the fight was over. It wasn't. But because we had already won something greater. We had proved to the galaxy that humanity was more than fragile bones and short lives. We had proved that weakness can be turned into fire, that fragility can become fury, that stubbornness can defy empires. We had proved that the weakest race could change everything. And no matter what came next, the Vorak and the galaxy would never forget it.